Hi everyone, welcome to our last video for our regular class wheel throwing project assignment. Our assignment is going to be a little bit tougher than the last ones. You probably expected that. We're going to be working on throwing an 8-inch tall cylinder, similar to what you started with your mug, but 8 inches tall, and it should be able to hold the volume of a water bottle. Here we have a 20-ounce water bottle, should be able to completely hold all of that. Now we started with bowls because of a couple reasons. Number one, with the bowl you leave a little extra clay on the bottom. That's sort of like your safety net that allows you to leave a little extra clay on the bottom, not have to worry about pulling it up. And also centrifugal forces working with us to help pull that bowl out, so you're not really counteracting any forces while you're working on it. Then we moved on to making mugs, which was a little bit tougher because we had to work on a nice even bottom, which takes a little bit of time, and then pulling that clay from the bottom to get a nice tall cylinder and using all the clay so that we don't have to trim it and we don't have to leave it heavy on the bottom. The beauty about working with a small cylinder is that you're able to put your hands into the cylinder and throw while your hands are touching one another. It's sort of a little bridge that links the two together so that you know your fingers are opposite one another the whole way through the pull. With this taller cylinder, the big trick is going to be not only making that bottom thin, making the walls thin, but pulling up that wall when one hand is inside and one hand is on the outside. It's going to be a little trickier. So here we go. We're going to begin just like we did with our other projects. Start by lightly wetting the vat, not a lot, and popping that ball of clay right down in the middle. You're going to want to work with a 2-pound ball of clay. That's our project assignment, is to learn how to make an 8-inch tall cylinder with 2 pounds of clay. Just like before, I'm going to start centering this by pressing the clay in and pressing the clay down. Now that you've got the skills of centering down, I'm going to introduce wheel wedging. Here's where I'm going to squeeze that clay up and then press it back down. That's not only going to help center the clay, but it's going to compact those pieces of clay platelets together so that they're really, really dense and less likely to tear, and also allow less water to penetrate the clay wall, which is going to make the wall a little bit weaker and make it harder to pull up. So I've got my piece centered. I can tell it's centered because it's not wobbling around. Now I'm going to open it the exact same way that I did a cylinder for a mug. Bracing it on the outside, my thumbs are going to go right down in through the middle until I'm down to about my ring finger, and I'm going to pull straight across out to my ring finger. How wide do I want to pull this bottom? You want to make sure to pull it wide enough that you can put that water bottle in there. So a couple tools you want to have with you besides your sponge, your rib, your wooden tool, is you're going to want to have a water bottle, and you're going to want to have a rib, or not a rib, but a ruler here with you. Now I'm going to start making my pulls. And just like a cylinder for your mug, I'm going to start by pulling mostly with my outside hand. It's going to be pulling in and up. Notice that while I'm pulling, I leave my right thumb sitting on top of the rim. That's going to help compress that rim and also make sure that my thumbs have a little bit of stable point to pull towards. And just before my fingers fall off the top of the pot, I'm going to slowly sneak away. Got one pull done. I'm going to go back in and pull my second. Slowing the wheel down a tiny bit. Moving nice and slow, consistent speed. Notice my arms are braced against my sides. And at 2 pulls, I've got a decent amount of height. Now as a beginner, you're probably not going to get quite that much change in form just from 2 pulls. Might take a few more. But with time, you want to get to where you can pull it in as few pulls as possible, because that means you're going to be able to do it while the clay has not gotten wet and thus wanting to shrink. So with 2 pulls, I'm going to check in to see what the height is. And after 2, I have just about 5 3/4, a little shy of 6 inches there. So I've got 2 more to go. This is the tougher part, because that clay down there on the bottom needs to come up. And I have seen some kids pull it up to 6 inches, then to 7, then 7.5. And after pulling so many times, the clay starts getting wet. And after the next pull, they went from 7.5 to 7 3/4, and then 7 1/4, and then 7. Clay starts getting weaker and starts settling down. So again, you want to try to do this in as few pulls as possible. reach back in here. And notice at this point, my thumb might be able to touch my other hand, but I can't really link them together. They can't touch like they normally do. So here's where I have to have faith that my fingers are opposite one another. So reaching in and squeezing the clay, slowly and consistently lifting up. And as you're pulling, the top part is probably a little bit thinner already. That's where we tend to have a little more confidence. So as you lift up, you're going to want to lighten your pull. Otherwise, if you're pulling a little too hard, sometimes you'll get a little bit of a torque here in the middle, which will look like a ripple. If that's the case, as soon as you notice any sort of twisting like that going on, you want to put your rib on the outside and compress that clay to kind of help get rid of that little ripple that goes on in there. Then you can pick up where your fingers were before and finish off your mug. All right, so we'll check back in after my third pull, up to about 8.5. Now there are all sorts of pitfalls that can go on along the way as you're doing this, such as your clay tearing or your clay torquing in the middle. So here's where I'm going to go back down in and start smoothing this up to make it a straight cylinder. But here's a really easy way to ruin your project. My hands are wet, but my arm up here is not. Notice that my pot is taller than my hand. If I have any dry spots in my skin, over here right now is catching. Any of that catches, it's going to torque your pot from the friction, and your pot is going to have a very quick death. So, as you're making taller pots, you kind of have to get your whole arm wet. When I'm throwing very tall pots, whole arm gets wet. So as it spins, you go through, compress that clay on the outside. Before you're finished, check back in, make sure you've got 8 inches, and we can fit a water bottle right down inside of it. One of the reasons I want everyone to be able to throw an 8-inch tall cylinder is because at this point, after you've made it, you can make almost any form on the wheel. I can turn this into a nice big round jar or vase. You can make lids for jars, you can make this into a pitcher. All forms, just like with the mugs, the different shapes, start out as a cylinder. And when you throw a tall cylinder, it greatly increases the amount of forms that you can now make. When it's finished, just like others, we trim away a little bit of clay off the bottom. Let it dry in front of the fan for a bit. Smooth up the bottom, sign it, and then we're going to fire it up, glaze it, and you're taking home your first tall cylinder. That's it, guys. Have lots of fun.